Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and for today's video, I'm going to be making the only objectively good world tier list. You heard it here first. This is the tier list to watch. These are the only correct opinions, and you shouldn't listen to anybody else. So, I've been seeing a bunch of people ranking all of the worlds lately. I know Kaiser Noah did one relatively recently, but you know what? I figured I might as well do one of these of my own. I actually, about a week and a half ago now, I did one with a bunch of other WizTubers. They streamed it. I was still getting out of class, so I was very late to that stream, but they streamed it. Frenzy Gamer, Pluto, I think were streaming it, so it'll be up on their channels. Yeah, I had my own takes. Their lists were wildly different from mine. I have to say I agree with some of it, don't agree with other parts of it, but that's why this is the only good tier list. So yeah, real talk, this is all subjective. Like, y'all can make lists of your own. Y'all can, like, I highly encourage y'all to talk about what you think of each world in my comment section below. So let's go ahead and get started with Wizard City. Now, I wish that there were two instances of Wizard City, because I would put the first edition maybe up here into the B tier, maybe even low A tier. But since the story revamp, it's yeah, and all of us in all of the WizTubers who got together and did that world tier list about a week and a half ago, we all decided to put it in the D tier. Like, the new Wizard City just doesn't have that oomph to it that the initial release Wizard City did, so D tier for that. Krokotopia, I think I'm gonna put this above Wizard City, but also in the D tier. I am not a huge fan of Croc. It's like kind of a grindy and slow world, but it's all right, and there is still nostalgia associated with it, so I am completely down to put Krokotopia in the D tier and not in the F tier. But yeah, once that graphics update hits, and like you know, you can see this go up. You can see this go up, because right now it's not very appealing visually to look at, but you know what? They can do it. I'm sure they can. I saw what they did with House of Scales. House of Scales is really, really good, and once we get to here, I will talk about that a bit more, but yeah, for now, Krokotopia gonna go in the D tier. Marleybone, I hate the British, but I am still going to put this in the C tier, as I did like some of the story beats, and it was just a generally good world. I liked it, but there's definitely a lot better, and there's also parts of it that I wasn't too big of a fan of, but I do think that I can safely slot this in at the very top of the C tier. MooShu is coming up next, and this, I think, I can also put relatively high in the C tier. I like it a little less than Marleybone, but MooShu, I do still like the story in MooShu, and it's nice and nostalgic, just like all the First Dark Worlds are. So MooShu, I'll put that in the C tier. It's good, and you know something? I really wish that the pirate versions of these worlds were also in here, because I would put Pirate MooShu and Pirate Marleybone up here in the S tier, because that is where they rightfully deserve to be. But the Wiz versions, the Wiz is what we're making this tier list about. So C tier for the both of these. But I highly recommend playing through Pirate, because Marleybone and MooShu in Pirate are just so much better. Dragonspyre is up next, and I honestly like this story in this world. It is definitely going to have to go into the A tier for me. The dungeons that still take a while, I think, are going to hold this down to maybe the bottom spot in the A tier, but I do still really like the story and just the theme of the world. It's something that I've liked for a while, and I really like it personally. So Dragonspyre, definitely going to put it into the A tier. I like it. It's a good world. I know that's not a real popular opinion, but Dragonspyre, I do think that it's good, and it has some good story beats to it. Grizzleheim, this is Frenzy's favorite world, so I've kind of come around to this a little. If we're talking about, because Wintertusk separately isn't on here, so I do think that yeah, the intention here is to loop them both in together. So in terms of that, I think I'm going to put Grizzleheim and Wintertusk just as a combined type deal into the B tier, because I really like Wintertusk and the story in that. and, you know, I've really come around to it, so there is that, and Wintertusk does give some pretty good XP, so it's just generally worth to do. And then I also like the story in Grizzleheim, as well as Wintertusk. It's nice and well put together, I have to say. So, Grizzleheim and Wintertusk, I'll give it a B tier. I've really come around to this over the last year since I did this kind of video last. So, Grizzleheim and Wintertusk, B tier. So next up is going to be Wysteria. So Wysteria, I honestly like doing Wysteria. I think that it's a nice little thing to do right after you finish Marleybone, because it's a little more polished, I want to say, and it's also a little shorter, and it does give you a nice little XP bump. So, you know, an XP bump, hard to argue with that, but I think I'm going to put that in the B tier with Grizzleheim and Wintertusk, just because Wysteria is just... I like it for what it is. I know a lot of people think it's a little goofy and they like to put it down like in the CD tiers, but I think it's good enough to put it into the B tier. That's just my personal opinion. I like some of what's going on. I like the Spiral Cup tournament, and it's just a nice little refresher to take in the middle of the first arc. So you'll have to see that. Zafaria, I am going to put this high in the A tier. I really, really like Zafaria. It is definitely a very good world, and I am honestly a massive fan. I did like the story. The only thing that I think does detract from it is that it can get a little repetitive. I mean, there are all those Greyhorn mercenary quests. I can't remember who counted them, but I think there was something like 10 total Greyhorn mercenary quests, and a lot of those were on the main storyline, and there are a few sides, but it's a lot of repetition in some instances. But I still really like Zafaria. It's like there's actual change where you're going in the world of Zafaria. That is one thing that its fellow A-tier companion, I guess, does not have, but I just really like it. Like, there is such a difference between the savannah, between Baobab, between Stone Town and the Drum Jungle, and especially the Elephant Graveyard. I mean, Zafaria just sort of has it all. I would say this might be a top 5 world. I'm gonna have to really think about Zafaria versus Mirage down here. Quick spoiler: this is gonna go up high, but I do think that Zafaria has what it takes to be a top 5 world. I do like it quite a bit. Avalon. Now, I am gonna say this right now. I know that some of those other WizTubers that were doing this on stream with me, they clown me a little, because it's like Avalon, most of the story is kind of a wild goose chase, but it's like, while you're there, you gotta stop and smell the silver roses sometimes, and that is my favorite part about Avalon. It's got its own story to it. It's not too tied to the overarching plot of Arc 2, but there are tie-ins to it, and I really like the theme. I like just everything about the story, really. And I mean, you know, Sword of Kings Wild Goose Chase aside, which honestly stops once you get to the wild, I want to say, it's just it's a good world with a good story, and you know, the gameplay doesn't suck yet. So yeah, Avalon, I'll put that in the S tier. So the next up is Azteca, and Azteca, if I say so myself, I do like Azteca in that it has a good story, but I don't like the gameplay. There is quite this sharp and steep drop-off after Avalon and going into Azteca, where there's like every boss is just this giant health sponge, and it's really no fun to play because, and this is something that me and the other WizTubers, we found this out as well. Azteca actually has like 1 or 2 more bosses than Chrysalis, and Chrysalis has 80 more quests. So just that sort of mind-numbing, just like feint stack as good as you can. You basically just have your item card, treasure card, and main deck feint. That's really the best that you've got. But I do think that Azteca's gameplay, it gets stale fast. Like, I know there's these 4 or 5 caves in this one specific area in the Mangrove Marsh, and like 4 of them, I want to say, have bosses that are on the main storyline. So Yeah, and you do them all in pretty quick succession. There is one quest where you have to beat like 3 different boss, like elemental spirits, which all have exceeding 15,000 health, and they all start with max pip, so you get, you know, Ifrited into the Frost Giant, into the Storm Dragon, into the Storm Lord, into the Sun Serpent. Just does mass, and they all crit spam on you, and then generally I'm just not the biggest fan of Azteca, but I do like it enough to where I am going to put it ahead of Croc and Wizard City. Aquila. Now, I really wish the pirate version was here because, you know, and this is going to be a hot take too. I'm sorry, Frenzy. I'm sorry, Slade. I'm sorry, Fang. If any of y'all are watching this, if any of the pirate people are watching this, but I do, unironically, like Aquila in Pirate. But when we're talking about Wiz, I honestly really like the execution of Mount Olympus. It's got a lot of good parts to it. It's like the Immortal Games, you know, and it's like Olympus. It can get kind of old when you're farming it, like day in day out. But the overarching story, and like there are also some cool bits of lore in there too, because in the puzzle with Eris Golden Apple in the middle of Olympus, there are these posters hanging all around that little arena room, and it's in those posters where you find the answers to Eris's mystery. So it's like, I know everybody just wikis it, but that is how you figure it all out. There's posters all around, and it basically just tells you. It's like that's what gives away the counters, and they do that in Atlantia and Tartarus as well. Tartarus is its own thing. Like if Aquila was just Tartarus, it would be up here. Because Tartarus, in my opinion, I think that is my genuine favorite dungeon in the game. It's just so well put together, and I really like it. So yeah, otherwise, I mean, Atlantia is Atlantia. I wish I had time to actually record an Atlantia special on my budget walkthrough, but time constraints and all that. It sucks. So maybe I'll get back to streaming that soonish, but I wouldn't count on it. But yeah, Tartarus, Atlantia, both just beautifully crafted dungeons. I really like them, even if Atlantia doesn't really drop anything good. But Tartarus in itself is just so good. And I mean, everything about Aquila is just really, really great. And I like it. I genuinely like it a lot. So, alright, enough gushing about Aquila. Let's go to our next S tier world. So Chrysalis, like I'm pretty sure all of us at the stream with me and all the other Wizards, we all agree that Chrysalis does deserve to at least be high up here. I can't remember if we put it in S. A lot has happened since then, but Chrysalis, it is deserving of the S tier in my humble opinion. And I know Greg's gonna love to see that too, but Chrysalis, genuinely, I mean, it is very long. 277 quests is no joke, but the story here is so, it's so good, and I mean, I just can't really describe it any better than that. It's like part 1, it's like you're sort of on this subterfuge mission, like trying to evade Morgana, figure out like how to dismantle the Umber Legion from within, and then part 2 is like this climactic thriller that you've got to see it through to the end, and it can get grindy, especially in the middle parts where you're at like the Crescent Beach especially is grindy. But yeah, it's like, man, I mean, there is just so much to Chrysalis that I really enjoy, and I've got to say, Chrysalis is just one of my favorite worlds. I would call it number 2, probably behind Avalon. So yeah, these are definitely my top 2 up here, because both of them are just so good. Speaking of good, 4 dungeons. Okay, so 4 dungeons. A lot of people just really consider Darkmoor in here, but if you look at the other 3 are quite good, and I personally really like them all. I think that, like Kembelung Village, I did that in my budget walkthrough as a solo, and I liked it. It was good. It was fun. And Kembelung, I would say, Kembelung, I would say, is maybe up here in the B tier, but then, you know, you get to Barkingham Palace, and, I mean, there's like a little story there. I would say that's also worthy of B tier, but then you get to the House of Scales, and House of Scales, I think, is going to cement it here. Like, cause Darkmoor I think is S tier, but it's like we have we have Darkmoor up here, House of Scales in here, and then Kembelung and Barkingham down here. So this is sort of like a good average. So yeah, we're gonna call it A tier. House of Scales, I really love the story, and we're actually about to get an update in Pirate 101 that from because when I played through the Through Death's Door update, the Tartarus update for Pirate, I thought after I was done with that we were finally going to figure out more about the House of Scales and the lore with that, and I think once that update does come out, I think it'll be underwhelming. But in terms of figuring out just, I guess, lore about House of Scales, that's going to really boost my enjoyment of it, because the story to it, I really do like it, and I mean, it's just hard to describe. House of Scales is just so good, and then, you know, Darkmoor, obviously, like I was saying, that is deserving of S tier, and I do think that, I mean, Darkmoor is where they started to really explore some darker themes, and I'm here for it. So yeah, Darkmoor is just one of the wonders of this game in terms of like story crafting and all that. So definitely Darkmoor would go up here for me. House of Scales in A, and then Barkingham and Kembelung down in B. So the average, like I said, A tier. I don't think it's better than Aquila, with all things considered, but yeah, A tier I think is where the 4 dungeons are going to reside on my list. So Polaris is up next, and this is going to be an S tier world. I think I have this at 4th maybe on my list. So Polaris, it is very worthy of being in the S tier. It's like, I love Chrysalis, but Polaris is so refreshing after it, and it's, I mean, yeah, I can't really describe it too well, but the story beats in Polaris. You know, we have like Ivan and all that, and it's short but sweet, and that's, I mean, what more can you ask for? It's got like it's really just got a good story to it, and yeah, I mean, can't really say much more than that. What more can I ask for? And then the Arcanum, I don't really think I can really put this anywhere, but there are some bits in it that I like enough to put in the B tier. So it's like, there's not much here, less than the 4 dungeons in Aquila, but what is there, I do think is nice and worthy of the B tier. So Empyrea, this is going to be 3rd out of all of the ones that I'm putting on. So Empyrea, I mean, I'm working on a video with one of my buddies who also likes Empyrea, and I'm waiting for him to get back from vacation, so we can maybe drop that next week. But Empyrea, just such a good world, and I've got a lot of nostalgia associated with part 1, and then part 2 is just such a masterpiece. And like, there are people that sort of rag on it, but it's kind of like Chrysalis in the sense that it's just like, you're definitely there for a reason, and you know, part 1 sort of just like delves into that, and it's like you're trying to find Khan and Ziggy Stardust and get to Xanadu and that sort of thing. But yeah, and then part 2 is where like that really deals with all the Raven and Spider stuff, and I mean, that part of the story is just really good, and I like that a lot. So I have to say, I mean, Empyrea, I'm gonna put it in the S tier, and I can really go more in depth with this, like in a little bit, maybe hopefully by next week, and that's just that's the goal. So definitely stick around to hear, I guess, my explanation on why Empyrea is so good. So there is that, and then Mirage is up next, and just, there's so much about this world that I really like. It's like the cast of characters is really great. Like, what else have we got? We've got like, it's like the gameplay is fun, and that's another reason why I like Polaris and Empyrea. But it's like the story here in Mirage is also just really, really good, and it's sort of teetering on the back end of S tier. I do really, really enjoy this world. It's always nice to come back through and play through it, and there's really nothing to hate in the world of Mirage. I can't really think of anything that I would really hate about it. So Mirage, I mean, I'll call that S tier. It's sort of teetering on the back, but I think it is worthy of getting up here, and I guess that does mean it is above Zafaria. But man, there's just so many good worlds. There's just so many good worlds in this game, and you really and truly love to see it, team. So Catacombs is up next, and a lot of people, I feel like, just underrate this. And I mean, it isn't a world, but I like the story of the Catacombs. I think is worthy of being like just under Dragonspyre. And I mean, it's I don't really know how to describe it too well. It's like when you're in the Catacombs, it's like it starts off with this, I guess, like trash monster plot, and then it has this whole lore thing to it, and it ties back into Dragonspyre, and it ties back into Wizard City, and it ties back into like how things got where they are, and the druids, and it ties back into Avalon. So it's like there's a lot of good parts about the Catacombs, and yeah, there's some hard boss fights, and some of them are rather annoying, but I mean, look, it is just beautifully done. Like, it's hard for me to really articulate, but Catacombs, it is definitely very, very well done, and I really like it a lot. So next up, we've got Caramel, and I'm not the biggest fan of Caramel, I'm gonna be real. It is nice and short and sweet, and I mean, there are parts to the story that I do like, and there are parts to the story that I don't like, and I think that results in it just being like a perfectly mid-world. I think it might at least be worthy of being above MooShu, so at least you have that. Lemuria, I'm going to put that at the very top of B tier. Like, Lemuria really picked it up, and there's just, it's like okay. So, one of my favorite parts about Arc 4 is Dasein, and Lemuria is where Lemuria is really the only world where Dasein is really involved much at all, and that is really saying something, because Novus, the world that he literally becomes, we have yet to talk about that one, but Dasein is just really involved in Lemuria, and it is just, I mean, his role in it, it's like he's finding out who he is and who he wants to be. And it's like we meet the heroes of Lemuria. That's another really, really high point for the storyline. And it's like, you know, we find all of the, I guess, stations, the old ones stations, where we find the, I guess, school tokens that we slot into that thing in Telos. And it has so many good things to it. And I really, really like Lemuria. Except for some of the gameplay. The gameplay genuinely bogs it down and out of A tier, because it's like think of a school of magic, and then think about what Lemuria mobs like you will be able to think of one. If I think of balance, I think of those manders outside of the jailer's room in Mandoria that just spam burn and, you know, aura pop and muzzle and all of that, and yeah, that's a whole thing. And it's like I think of ice, and I think of those colossi guards also in Mandoria, that just spam shields out the ass, and yeah, it's like the fires, you know, the mantle spam, the life wizard. There's a lot, like the myth wizards can stun. Okay, so maybe, yeah, definitely not worthy of A or S tier, just because I truly hate playing through the world in terms of gameplay, like actually fighting mobs. But overall, the story is, like, Arc 4's story is at its peak in this world, so I'm gonna call that B tier, top of B tier, safely. Novus, I think, is going to be at the bottom of B tier. There were there were some parts that felt a little contrived. I wasn't too big on the whole spiral powers thing, but it definitely wasn't terrible. I did like Novus, at least, and it's like the parts where Dasein like was a part of the story were good, but I mean he just wasn't there too much. So yeah, Novus, the gameplay, it got a little better. There were still those Arc mobs, but Novus, just overall, it wasn't too bad. So yeah. Finally, we have Wallaroo, and I'm going to put that in the C tier above Caramel. And I don't know if it's just because I had to play it 7 times within the last year, but Wallaroo is like, there are good parts about it, but there are also parts that I'm not too into, like the whole Ned Collie plot, and it's like, what else is there? It's like there were also just some very unfun boss fights. It feels like there was at least one unfun boss fight per world, and in Wallaroo it was, I can't even remember. It was definitely the iterations of Freddy, especially when he had like another boss at his side. It's like those were just like very tough for like a just like a solo player. So wasn't really too big of a fan on that. So yeah, I mean there were still parts that I did like Billabong Resort was a fun little bit. And so was the Eucalyptus Forest, and I mean, learning about, I mean, the Malice bit and the Nightmare. It's like the story of the Nightmare was good. I just didn't really like how that played all that much. So, yeah, Wallaroo, C tier. And I did sort of drag in Celestia cheekily towards the beginning, but there are no redeeming qualities here. The Crustacean Empire is a thing. The Grotto is a thing. The Science Center is a thing. It's like Storm Ribbon is a thing. It's like there are no redeeming qualities about Celestia, and everything just sort of crit spams you to death. So not a fan of this world at all. But that is going to wrap up this tier list and full ranking of each of these worlds. So yeah, agree, disagree, definitely leave a comment or 50, as it were. So yeah, thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like, right? 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I will see y'all later.